Hello and welcome to the Book Bunch. My name is Sam. It's so great to have you guys here for another video. And this one will mark my 100th book read for the year. So I'm super pumped about that. I initially had a goal at the start of this year to reach 200 by the end of the year. But at the time, I had no plans of starting uni. And then when I started uni and found out how intense that actually was going to be, I dropped my goal down to 150 for the year. So I'm a third of the way there. Once I reach 150 though, I'm just going to keep going and just see how many I can get in the year, because if I can still make that 200, that would be great. But I just don't want to put my pressure on myself to try and achieve something so extreme when I am studying full time. And I have a baby, so, well, a toddler. So yes, all things considered, today's video is going to be talking about some non-fiction reads that I've read in the last week. They have all been quite good. There's also an ebook I have to share with you guys as well. But we're just going to get in. It's probably not going to be a very long video, but that's all right. I'm actually going to be camping when this video comes out, so I wasn't sure if I'd get anything out at all. So the fact that you can see me now means that I achieved more than I thought I would. So first is 150 Essential Insights on Faith. This is by Billy Graham. This is just a compilation of various quotes that he had made throughout his career on various topics. I had expected this to be much better than it is. A lot of, I love Billy Graham and I think he is great. And so I thought this book would be really great and be some really key life-changing statements that he made. But honestly, a lot of them are just whatever. So it hasn't been as fruitful as I had hoped it would be. So overall, it's probably only a 3 out of 5. Although I don't really love rating non-fiction just because everyone has a different opinion on non-fiction things. But yes, if I had to, it's just middle of the road. If you like Billy Graham, it might be worth you grabbing. Otherwise, don't rush for it. I do like the little cover though. I think that's really nice. Then I read You Are Worth the Work. This is a non-fiction about moving forward from trauma to faith. So this is a Christian therapy book. This talks about this type of therapy that they like to call the tiny habits method. But really, if you know anything about therapy, it's just a DBT, so delectable behavior therapy. They just rebranded it. And I didn't love this book at all. Again, I think I put it as 3 stars on Goodreads just to give it some kind of rating, because you need to for Goodreads. But I didn't like it pretty much at all, and I don't know, but I don't want to not recommend it because it might just not be my style. As someone who is currently studying counseling from a Christian perspective, I didn't mind I don't mind DBT as a therapy style. I think it's okay. It definitely has its pros and cons depending on who you are and the type of way you learn and will respond to therapy. However, I didn't like her view on forgiveness. I didn't think it was very biblical. And I think if you do want to know anything about forgiveness in a biblical way, or even as someone who has trauma and all of that, rather than listening to the world, I do think you should go read Timothy Keller's book on forgiveness called Forgive, that he released just before he passed away, because it was absolutely life-changing and was extremely biblical, and it completely it exposes exactly how society views forgiveness nowadays, and how even the church has warped forgiveness to be something that it shouldn't be. He talks about the fact that forgiveness shouldn't be this thing that you just do because it's a Christian thing to do. God doesn't just tell you to forgive and let yourself continue to be hurt and all of that. There's still a level of repentance that needs to happen on the other person's end a lot of the time. And yet he breaks down the types of forgiveness that is shown in the Bible, and I just feel like that's a better resource for you than this in regards to forgiveness. So I don't necessarily agree with that. And there was one other thing that I didn't love. I don't love how her whole thought process, this tiny habits idea, is basically adding to DBT with this idea of celebrating. And that every tiny incremental little thing you do, even if it is complimenting yourself or just it could be the slightest thing. She says that you should celebrate that and celebrate all the little things, which I do agree that celebration is good and joy is good, and it can help you to reframe your viewpoint when you are recovering. However, you have to be so careful that it doesn't give you a big head, because then it can cause you to go from one extreme to the other. And you don't want to jump from self-pity to vanity or pride. And I think that is something you need to be real careful of if you follow her method. As well as, I can't help but think that if you celebrate every little thing in life, the times where you really should celebrate and there's something big that you have accomplished, that celebration will be cheapened because of it. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't find joy or feel blessed by the little things, because that is different. And acknowledging those blessings and being grateful is very different. And even just enjoying having moments of joy is very different to celebrating every thing you do. And someone who has come from a very traumatic past, I understand why she's doing what she's doing, but I just feel like you have to be very careful. And it can't be a long-term, this method of therapy she's trying to present shouldn't be a way of life. It should be for a season, and then be done away with so that you can truly live. So that's my opinion. You can disagree, I don't mind. But yes, then there was 7 what was this called? Christian History in 7 Sentences. Sorry, I forgot. This is something I read with my husband. We did this as our Bible study for a little while, like to go along with our Bible reading, just because neither of us have much knowledge of early church history. It's not been something either of us have really been taught in our lives. And so we decided to start with this. I do have a more in-depth version written by somebody else that I am interested in reading. But it basically talks about different points in the early church that have basically gotten us to where we are now, or significant movements in the church. A lot of it is very, especially a lot of the early stuff is very, what's the word? It's very focused on like Catholicism and everything, because obviously the Reformation only happened part way through the church history. But it's interesting to see how people have throughout time disagreed on fundamental theological points. And it always blows my mind how we can all be reading the same Bible and somehow not come to the same conclusion. And it really does go to show, like, those verses in the Bible that talk about like people's eyes will be blinded, that they'll listen but not hear, that kind of thing. Have eyes but not see. It very much feels like that. I think a lot of the time people allow deception to get in the way, or they just aren't on guard enough to to acknowledge and recognize when they are being deceived, and it is a an issue we've had as a church for centuries. I mean, even Israel, if you go back that far, like, they were constantly being deceived, and constantly looking to other gods and other things and not keeping their eyes fixed on Jesus. And it's just part of our sin nature to want to look everywhere but him. And it was a good lesson, I feel like, that we need to be on the ball and on top of it, and really making sure that we are living out those biblical principles and that biblical foundation, and making sure that we aren't taking anything out of context or reading into it something that would fit into our lives for our own convenience. So yeah, it was interesting enough to know. I don't know that I liked how she spoke about it, because she used a lot of big words that I feel like the average Christian might not be educated in. I know my husband and I weren't, and so we struggled with taking in a lot of the information. So I'll be interested to see how someone else writes the same stuff. But yeah, it wasn't bad. I will leave it in middle of the road. I will quickly mention as well the ebook that I read, and then we'll get on to my 5-star read, because I actually did want to give this one a rating. But I also read Dying Thoughts of Richard Baxter. It is just a 80 something page ebook that I picked up because I had read some of his quotes in someone else's book, and they said they really liked him. And so I picked up his Dying Thoughts book, and then one of his other books as well. It might have even been his autobiography, I don't remember. But yeah, it was all right. I think there were definitely some gems in there, but a lot of what he was saying in the book was just a reiteration of principles and ideas that I already believe and already have come to in my walk with God. So I can see how it would be beneficial for maybe a newer Christian, or yeah, I guess just people that are at a different stage in their journey to me, because it was more just him affirming what I had already come to the conclusion of. But I can see, if you hadn't got to that point, or you hadn't found those conclusions, that this book would be helpful for you to know the heart of God, and how we should be, and how much our focus should be on God. So yes, that is a quick mention for you guys as well. But finally, we have The Hiding Place by Corrie ten Boom, and I gave this a 5 out of 5. I highly recommend this to anyone and everyone. It's only 200 pages, so it won't take you very long. But boy, firstly, very well written. It reads a bit like what's her name? Kate. Hang on, I've got her book here. Kate Moore, her books. So Kate Moore is a biographer who writes non-fiction books about significant women in history, or things that happened in history that aren't talked about and were kind of silenced a little bit. She wrote the book on the Radium Girls that I've reviewed for you guys, and The Woman That Could Not Be Silenced. Both very good books. I love her writing style, and she basically writes in such a way that these non-fiction things almost read like fiction, because they're just so smooth, and like the viewpoint really like brings you into the story as if you were there with them and experiencing it all moment by moment. So very, very skilled at memoirs and all of that kind of thing. And this book by Corrie ten Boom, and a couple of other people who like kind of proofread it and wrote the foreword on it, very similar. The way she writes about this time in her life, it felt like you were there in the moment with her, living it with her, but it also felt a little bit like fiction, if that makes sense. Like when you read a first person fiction and you're like going along with that person and how smoothly all of that goes, this felt like that. And it was very touching and very amazing, and just, yeah, to see the faith that people had during this time is just extraordinary, and how in some of our greatest suffering can come like the greatest spiritual changes in people, and how God really does shine the brightest in the darkness. It was really, really amazing, and I enjoyed every moment of it. But it's obviously a heavy topic. We're talking about a woman who was in living in occupied Holland, and she was trying to protect the Jewish people and hide them, and then she got captured and ended up in prison and concentration camps and all the rest of it. So it's very heavy stuff, but yeah, again, the way she's written it it doesn't tax your soul to read, and it always points to how good God is, and how if you just let go of your humanness and you cling on to his principles and his ideals for us to live, how at peace we can be. And the person who most affected me in this book wasn't actually Corey herself, although her story alone is amazing. Her sister Betsy, and I feel like Corey probably feels the same in the way that she talks about Betsy and writes about her, how she truly embodied the idea of love your enemies, love them, feel for them, do whatever you can to bring them to Christ. Like, she lived that out like no one I've ever read about or heard about before. And it was a bit convicting and very inspiring, and I really hope that I can come to that place. And I know Corey struggled with that. You can see that throughout the book. She struggles with that, and she's like, how does Betsy keep doing this? How does she keep loving and keep having that perspective? And yeah, like Corey gets there in the end, but it was just amazing to read about. And she's written 2 other books as well. One that's about her growing up before the events of this, called In My Father's House, and then there's one for after this about the what's it called, rehabilitation work that she did, called Rant for the Lord, where she basically went and helped all the Germans and all the people that had oppressed her, and how she helped in their recovery and bringing them to Christ, as to live up to the legacy that Betsy left. So I'm really looking forward to getting the other books and reading more about her and her story. And yeah, it was just amazing. So I really recommend it for anyone who likes biographies or just needs to be inspired from a fellow Christian, because it was really, really, really good, and I can't wait to meet her in heaven and talk about her. And I must say, when I had picked up the book, it wasn't what I had expected to read, because when I was really young, like I have a memory of when I was really, really little, like maybe 6 or 7, and I had like a board book about Corrie ten Boom, but it wasn't at all what I remember her life being about. So I'm like, and I don't know if that's because maybe it's about one of the other books that I was reading this board book about, or if I've just muddled things in my memories or what. But yeah, I'm glad that I gave that a chance and read it instead of just thinking I already knew, because I really didn't. So yes, highly recommend this one. This was a 5 out of 5. It is one worth giving a rating to. So yes, go check those out if any of those sound interesting. Sorry about my little bit of rant in the middle there. But have a great week, guys. I'll be hopefully doing a science fiction video for you next. I also have a pile of books to do a book haul for you guys as well, so we'll just see what order I end up doing it in. But yes, keep an eye out for videos upcoming, and I'll see you then. Bye!